Now, Vinny doesn't need any further introduction. He's the scariest 23-year-old I've ever met. Sarah, you need to come to our offices. We've got some very cool chairs and no one's ever been interviewed in them. So that might explain some of our problems. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Rob Adams, who some of the people in the room will know. If you don't know personally, haven't met before, should certainly know by reputation, because it's a fantastic story. It's your second visit here, Rob, I believe? Third visit here. And it's part of a commitment to New Zealand growth and making it happen. I think Rob would say one of his favourite and specialist areas is market validation and how to make it real from there. It comes off the back of a very successful corporate career, but much more importantly, I think, for this audience, has been involved now in the financing of over 40 companies, the launching of over 100 products, and the raising of over $1 billion in capital. So this isn't a theoretical conversation about what you might do. This is a conversation with three people who have done stuff and will give you real answers to real questions. Rob's written a couple of books. I love the titles. First one, A Good Hard Kick in the Arse. The second one, If You Build It, They Will Come. Both of which I think are titles that are very appropriate to people in this room right now. So I want to start, I guess one of the development things I believe in is that too often we spend a lot of the time working on our weaknesses and not on our strengths, because we've been taught from the beginning that, if you moderate your weaknesses, you can, sort of become okay. And last time I checked, Dan Carter's not in the All Blacks for his ability to prop a scrum. He's not working on that weakness, and he has very little interest in fixing it. Whereas, he is maximising his strengths all the time. And one thing I'd like to ask the panellists to start with is, what are the key strengths that you think New Zealand startups, New Zealand entrepreneurs, New Zealand organisations should maximise when they're starting to look at particularly expanding to any country other than New Zealand? So what are the strengths you think we most have?
Who wants to start?
I actually thought about it, so should I actually use my mic?
Ladies first. Ladies first, Kelly.
You can be heard, so you go.
Okay. I really believe when you're starting a business, and particularly a business that you're going to export, you really need to have strength across your whole business. It is not good enough to just have a good product or a good sales team or a good brand. You actually have to have great finance, great logistics. You need to have the whole business rocking. So it's a hard question for me to answer, because in my view, to get ahead when you're exporting in particular, you cannot have weakness. In saying that, of course, I've got my own strengths and weaknesses, and even though I'm an accountant, finance isn't my love, but sales and marketing is. But we built a business that was strong around sales, marketing, brand, logistics and finance, and they all rolled together. If you're looking at any one core sort of talent and gut that Kiwis have, is we get out there and do it. So I think that we need to remember to stay on that gut. We're good, we're creative, we're innovative, we're fun, we have passion, and surround ourselves with people that can build the rest of the business with us and go.
Rob?
I think I'd add on to Sarah's point, and she had mentioned this earlier, you got to go narrow and deep to start. If you're, and it's really picking up on what she just said, you've got to get things right locally before you can expand internationally. Tim spoke a little bit about sort of, deciding what not to do, and talked about the $10 innovation. Think about getting your product to work locally, be it in this market, be in the Australian market, before expanding beyond that, and get it right. Too many times there's this sort of distraction of it's time to export. Well, let's get the business running efficiently here, and that's really what Sarah said, before really pushing into other markets. Because if it's going to sell in other markets, it's got to sell here first. If it's not selling here, it won't necessarily sell in other markets.
Is that working?
Yeah.
I remember reading this. It said a while back, sell across your street, sell across your cities, and sell across oceans. And I think that reiterates what Rob was talking about. I also read something else. It was a research paper, but the opening of it was with a quote or a joke of sorts. It said scientifically, and this is proven, that aerodynamically bumblebees can't fly. but nobody told the bumblebee that. So it goes on flying anyways. The point I'm trying to make here is that we don't know a lot of things in New Zealand, be it geographical isolation, be it whatever. But that's our strength. If you go out there and you ask too many people, even if they don't know, they'll give you an answer. That's been my experience. And I'm glad that I have some people around me who are brutally honest rather than hypocritically polite. And that's been really helpful. And I think that the fact here that we don't know a lot is a strength. Because when you go into the market overseas, like India, for example, I think it won't work the first time you go there. Second time, third, maybe even the 10th, it won't work. But you have to, that's not failure, that's market learnings, and just make sure when you succeed, it's worth it. That philosophy, but always have that, as Steve Jobs said, stay hungry, stay foolish. The foolish part comes here and applies quite well to New Zealand because there's a lot of things we don't know, and it's good.
Yeah, healthy dose of naivety.
So not losing the naivety, not killing innovation, ability to just not worry about what could go wrong, potentially. One other question I had in mind, and I might ask one more after that, and then we'll start getting some questions from all of you folks, is a number of people I suspect in the audience, and it's a bit funny me asking it, have come from a big corporate or a big, what we regard as a big corporate. I'm not sure New Zealand actually has any really big corporates. And you consider that shift to an entrepreneurial life, or you make that move. And Rob, you and Sarah both have got that, a little bit of that in your story. Vinny, you're just too young. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
What are you saying about Rob and I?
I'm saying that you are successful
that one, no?
in both corporate and entrepreneur. I don't know. I'll give up. But what's the thing you have to shift quickest in your head to make that move? And I suspect there might be a number of people out there who are, making that move or considering that move, moving from a corporate life to an entrepreneurial life.
They shift you, don't they?
Yeah, they may give you no choice.
Yeah, you go.
Well, sort of the word on the street shifting from a corporate life to a startup life is you don't want to be the first company the corporate person works for. Because there's such a radical adjustment. So for corporations, many corporations feel that they're entrepreneurial in their approach and they talk entrepreneurship, but you do have to experience it to really understand what it is. So it is a radical state change. And when you really look at the people that do it successfully, they don't leave a corporate job and go run a startup. They leave a corporate job and go into a senior level in a startup and get close to the action and experience it really under somebody else's leadership. Okay, much as corporate people tend to think they're overqualified for a position in the startup world, you really need a stepping stone. So find a quality stepping stone, find something that leverages the domain knowledge you have from your corporate experience, and get the startup thing or the early stage thing or the smaller company than your corporate thing. Get that experience, then go do the sort of from scratch startup. That's usually the pattern that provides the highest probability of success.
I have no idea. I was thinking about it, I have no idea.
Great answer.
Yeah, I guess I had my experience is a little bit similar to Rob's, but I did lead a big corporate, corporate finance banking in the UK, and then pestered my father to hang out with him, and I was hanging out with him because he didn't pay me anything, for a couple of years because he was very entrepreneurial. So I guess, you're right in saying that, Rob, although I would have said I kind of got kicked out of the corporate environment because I wasn't any good at it, and I wasn't particularly good at ticking the bottom ahead of me, which I felt was necessary to climb the corporate ladder. Didn't necessarily like the bottoms that were ahead of me, so I decided not to tickle any of them and go out by myself. But yeah, my father would have been probably that person that enabled me to then have the confidence to start my own business. Having said that, it was something that is often nurtured in you anyway. From a young age, I think I was always destined to do my own thing and not be too constrained by a corporate culture. So it's an interesting conversation people have in their head as to whether you think that you are entrepreneurial and can be entrepreneurial, because you can lead a horse to water but you can't let him drink.
I heard it was a Radio New Zealand interview, and I only listened to it about 2 weeks ago, but it was with a professional, I forget her name, an Indian woman, talking about the difference between, in India, the choice is about, in the end, everyone's an entrepreneur because there is no welfare system nor corporate system. And that the entrepreneurs were there to feed their family, not to make millions. And it went on to the difference between a corporate person where, in corporate life from time to time you get those moments where you're, unloaded with a check and you just think, oh, I'll go and start something up. And the amount of risk you're taking is so minimal because you're financially comfortable and sorted that the difference in commitment between the person who is doing it and putting everything on the line versus someone who's saying this would be a fun thing to do with a severance check. It was a very interesting, 10 minutes just to listen to the mental commitment difference that it really was and represented. Look, last question for me. I heard an equation yesterday that said performance equals energy less interference. And it worked from my point of view. And I'd be really interested, from what you guys know of New Zealand startup, New Zealand entrepreneurs, New Zealand, the people in this room, is the problem a lack or not enough energy or allowing too much interference?
That is such a cool equation. I really, really relate to it. I think focus is, as I said when I was talking, focus is paramount to getting ahead. So that's all I'd say. I love that equation.
Yeah, how do I put this in words? Just give me 1 second. I like constraints, but I don't like limits. And I think constraints are good because it helps you focus your energy. And a lot of thinking process these days is people say think outside the box. I think the box is what needs the fixing first, initially. Because the box is good. You just have to define the limits of that box and you have to define what comes in it and where you think. I think that energy needs to be focused with constraints. And in New Zealand, people have a lot of energy. I went to high school here, I went to university here, and I've dealt with a lot of amazing people, but it just so happens that most of them, I think in Tim's, they were in the dreamer side of things. Very few people actually wanted to execute. And I myself am not even close to the execution yet. I'm still dreaming. But the fact is
You've
now...
got time. Okay.
Now I'm dreaming with that box initially placed by myself. And that really helps me focus that energy. And another thing which comes in mind, sorry it's not very directly related, is I read this in the paper a few days ago. It said that some company, I don't want to name it, is stable in New Zealand. I think stable is a step backwards between success and failure. I never want to have my company stable. And that concept will come in when you are already active and thinking about things you want to move ahead in the future, and you put those right constraints on you. That's what I think.
Rob?
I'd probably modify that equation a little bit, Chris, put brackets around it and say times persistence. In other words, you just got to keep going. You have to push hard. The world is guilty of a little bit of selling entrepreneurship as kind of like cereal. It's easy to do and you want to go do it.
Doesn't taste that great though.
Yeah, put a little more sugar in it, usually it's more digestible. But the key thing is you have to stick with it. If you choose if you choose the entrepreneurial approach, you have to be very, very persistent because it doesn't always work. And the definition of an entrepreneur when it doesn't work is not somebody who runs back and gets the corporate job back, but somebody who just gets up and tries it again.
Can I add a little more?
You will.
So this comes back to the fact which I want to reiterate was that I mentioned brutally honest over hypocritically polite. I was talking to a friend of mine with Startup Weekend that they run a lot of places, and some of the ideas are really shit, like utterly never gonna work. Nobody thought anything about them, and I said to him that in New Zealand we should have that culture where it's good to say everybody's a winner sometimes in primary school, but when you get to a certain level, if no idea is good, nobody wins. Everybody goes home from Startup Weekend, you try again next week. And the philosophy here, what I'm trying to say is, a lot of people in this room, a lot of entrepreneurs will come to you to ask for advice. Be brutally honest with them. Tell them it's shit. Try it again. Andy does it all the time.
He's talented at that.
Yeah.
Very good. What I'd like to do now is grab questions out of the room, and I think what we need to do, probably we've got a team with some handhelds, yep, so if we get a couple of hands up, people ready to go, and get your microphones. While we're doing that, just on the subject of there are no silly questions, we had a problem with one of our mail platforms last week. I wrote an apology email to 300,000 customers. Some of them are very good at coming back with advice on how to run your company. It's fantastic. And one, I got a letter in the mail this morning, from a wonderful, gorgeous 80-year-old woman who wrote to me to thank me for my apology and tell me how much she was enjoying her iPad and its connectivity to the world. She wrote me the letter to tell me that. So there's always another angle. Please think about that with the questions. So have we got questions ready to go? We've got one back here, please. And if there's one over here, someone will get a mic to someone and be ready to go straight away. Just put your hand high up in the air when you're ready to go. Sir.
John Graves from Slide Speech. The number 3,000 businesses, that means we need another 2,000. That means we need how many failures ultimately? I've started 3 businesses in the last 6 months. Andy told me at least one of them is a shit idea. So we're working on bringing the numbers up. How can we bring more companies forward?
Connect. I think, we talked earlier about weaknesses, and in my view, you recognise your weaknesses, you recognise them quickly, you don't dwell on them. You go and grab people that are strong in your areas of weakness. And I think one of the things that we're sort of lacking a bit in New Zealand is we've got the smarts, we've got the creativity, as I said before, but we're not linking as well with business smarts. Creativity is not linking with business smarts as well as it could. And then, let's set further with the export smarts as well. So really, go and talk to people, and talk, put the phone up 100 times so you find the person that's right for you, because it's a bit like going and getting a boyfriend. You can't just go and find the right person for you, but there'll be someone out there for whatever weakness that you have, and that would be my advice, and that's literally what we did at Trilogy. We had some strengths, but we had a lot of weaknesses, and we went and found the right people to partner with to get ahead.
This is a great company, so I look forward to having a chat with you this week. President Obama said this just a little while back. He said, countries that out-educate us today will out-compete us tomorrow. And I think this really applies to New Zealand as well. One thing is that we are small, so we can do a lot of things that other companies can't do. And being small means we can move faster than other countries can. And I think, let me give you an example of the University of Auckland. I'm a big fan. I went there, did engineering. In University of Auckland, there's engineering campus, there's a business school, there's law. In my time there, other than Spark, I didn't meet a business student or a law student. And that really limited the way I think about IP, production, or marketing, or branding, and all of these things. We need in our university, if I shouldn't even go back to high school, of education of entrepreneurship and learning how to work in teams and think together. I think university particularly has to be a hotbed for entrepreneurship. This is the safest place to learn and fail again. And Spark even comes in much later down the track. It's an amazing program, but it's limited by how many people know about it. Entrepreneurship needs to be infused into the curriculum in New Zealand. Only then we can ever hope to reach that 3,000 goal.
And Rob?
My read on it, I'm back to persistence. If you look at the stats, 1 in 5 startups succeed. That means you got to do 5 startups to get 1 to succeed, would be another way to look at it. So, one of the things I push on market validation is the key to success is fast failure. So if the idea is not going to work, listen to Andy when he says it's not going to work. But prove it quickly, and then move on to the next thing. And again, think of it, like an investor thinks of a portfolio. If 1 in 5 succeeds and you got to do 5, better to do 5 in 3 or 4 months each. Than 5 for 5 years each. So be persistent, fail fast, and you've got to keep trying.
And last but not least, I think money shouldn't be a goal. Money should be a byproduct of what you're doing. A lot of people in New Zealand have forgotten that.
There was a study done on successful Australian businesses listed, stock exchange listed Australian businesses, and the number one key to the top 10 successful Australian businesses was that they do what they say they're going to do. Very simple. They do what they say they're going to do, and I think that's really, really a really good way of thinking about it. What are you going to do? Go and do it. Execute on strategy.
Another question over here.
Yeah, hi, Sasha Webb from Young Enterprise. I love your comments, by the way, that entrepreneurialism needs to be built into the schools, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. My question to you would be, if you ask an 8-year-old, what is a sportsman or what is a scientist, they have a one-sentence answer. What is it that we need to be getting them to say so that when we ask them what is an entrepreneur, A, they know an answer and can articulate it? Because that's the challenge that I think we face as an organisation. They just don't know what it means.
Someone that has a great time when they go to work. That would be a simple way to tell an 8-year-old how, you know, how good an entrepreneur is, how good it is to be an entrepreneur.
I really think entrepreneurship is a form of business strategy. I mean, you can have large entrepreneurial companies and small entrepreneurial companies. So I'm not sure entrepreneurship is its own thing per se. I think entrepreneurship is a way of doing business. I'd argue Google is very entrepreneurial given its size, and they act like a startup on a lot of fronts. Apple is very entrepreneurial given its size. So all you're really doing is taking a very creative, persistent, unconventional approach to fixing a problem. And I'd argue, again, we really need to educate on what business is, and entrepreneurship is a form of doing business.
I have a very different definition of entrepreneurship in my own head, in ways I don't even consider. I haven't figured out what an entrepreneur is myself, but I certainly think there's a difference between a businessman and an entrepreneur. It's to do with the risk-taking appetite. It's to do with something, as I mentioned, something more than just making money. I think entrepreneurship, I'm not sure if you can explain it to an 8-year-old in many ways, but I think going back to what Sarah said is somebody who's doing what they love doing, and we just have to build a positive image, not necessarily help them understand exactly what they do, but see them, give them the right idols to look up to. But at an 8-year-old, he wants to be a fighter pilot. He doesn't want to be an entrepreneur back then. I did. I wanted to be a scientist. So I think it's too early to really describe them what entrepreneurship is, but just to give them an image that it's something positive, it's something people are doing what they love doing.
It would be good if we could get the media to focus more on positive business stories. I think that would really help us. If that we could we could generate some excitement through the media for great business stories, as opposed to relentless focus on, let's face it, rugby.
Or relentless focus on business failure, which is,
which is,
you know, the stories that are written about startup failures as if they could see it coming.
You're so right. There are so many cool businesses out there that the media could write about in an interesting way. That's what I'd like to see more of, just to build the profile of business up through the average kind of thinker.
It's a long-term goal.
Next question coming. Yeah, a very long-term goal potentially, that one right here. It's just microphones on the way, sir.
Just a comment on entrepreneurship and education. I just was introduced to a video on TED.com on Sir Ken Robinson. Watch it. It's beautiful how we educate ourselves out of entrepreneurship and creativity. So that's a beautiful clip to watch. But I was really inspired by your comments, Sarah, earlier on around around the ethics, around sustainability, what you talked about. We can't just grow forever uncontrollably. I mean, there's got to be some limit. We've got finite resources on the planet. And we are all like-minded people here in this room. We all want to grow, doing some crazy and cool things. I've got projects running in Alaska. I go to Barrow and all those sort of crazy places. But I also look at the ecology, and the planet is very fragile. So I was touched by your comments. So I'd be very keen to hear 3 different perspectives on sustainability. How do we become responsible about those things as well? Thanks.
I think I've sort of answered first last few times, so I'll hand over to one of the boys.
What kind of sustainability did you mean? Environment sustainability, business sustainability?
I think it's social and environment.
So if we think about it in terms of business sustainability, maybe to start.
Well, listen, I think it's a cultural imperative, right? I mean, there's only so much energy in the world, there's only so many resources in the world. Clearly the world is getting more sensitive to it. You know, there was kind of the excess of the 90s, I guess, was sort of the peak. And I think it is, now people highlight it, you know, it's sort of, you know, the term you hear is the kind of pejorative term of greenwashing. I think those days are over, and now it's just an expected way of doing business. And I think, you know, similar to the way, you know, sometimes profits get emphasized, people are more and more looking at the, you know, the sustainability index, the returning of natural resources, the give back of investments into the community. So I think it's trending in the right direction, and I think the expectations are just going to go up over time.
And I really like the not smoking campaign in New Zealand, because before it used to be, I'm going off topic but I'll come on topic. It used to be it wasn't socially acceptable kind of to ask people not to smoke in some places, but since then, like famous sports people or actors and all of them in the ad campaign, it's become, people have been more aware. It's easier, socially acceptable to ask somebody not to smoke in areas and things. What I'm trying to get at here is, this is something which can't be done forcefully. How many people in this room have seen the movie Inception? Okay, so not many, but in Inception is a concept that positive reinforcement is slow, but it lasts much longer than negative reinforcement. And the same thing has to come in here. You have to plant an idea in somebody's head, let them figure it out themselves that what they're doing is right or wrong. Because the moment you tell them, they subconsciously start to judge if it's what's happening. So we can't, I think we can't go out there and say do business sustainability, do corporate social responsibility, this, that. It's just as Rob pointed out, it has to become socially acceptable in society to do those things, and it'll transition out slowly.
Yeah, and it will when there's 9 billion of us on the world.
We might be on Mars.
You know, it will. And just the word sustainability, though, I think isn't the right word. I think that we're going to move on from the word. I bet you there's no one in the world that knows what sustainability really means, that word. I think what we need to think more about is responsibility. And so my personal view is that increasingly businesses will want to become, have to become, for all these reasons, more responsible. And that will be how we sustain the planet. And if we don't, we're all gone. How's that for depressing?
Thank you. I can't see a thing back there. How long have we got?
One more question.
Right. I just saw people waving. It was friendly. Just one question. I think there's a dichotomy I'd love you guys just give me a perspective on. We've talked about two things. One is that you've got to stick at it, 5 years to become profitable in Australia, I think, Sarah, 17 years McDonald's in India. And then, 1 out of 5 fail fast, fail quick. So what are the lessons learned that you would share with this audience about knowing when to pull up, when it's time to get out and move on and do something different rather than stick to it? So that balance between execute and exit.
Well, I push, anyone who knows me, I push market validation. I push figure it out before you even start. If you're going to launch into a market, what's the problem you're fixing? Why are people going to pay you for it? It's extraordinarily simple to do. It takes a little bit of time and a little bit of money, and it saves you a whole lot of heartache. So, I can show you how in 60 or 90 days you can figure out whether you got an opportunity or not. And it's a lot easier to figure it out in 60 or 90 days with a little bit of money than going and raising, millions of dollars and spending 4, 5, 6 years realizing the thing didn't work. So I'm a big believer of figure it out early, be prepared, and if the results come back in a way that don't make sense, just move on to the next idea.
I'm a little bit different to Rob here because with fact, you get a lot of fiction. And so I would say that the reason we got ahead is all about the gut. And whenever we've had it wrong, we've known that instinctively. So you can. I believe in research. I believe in going into market. And before we launched in the UK, I went up to that market 5 times before we launched up there. So I believe in research, but that's got to be coupled with the fact that you're going to get a bit of fiction with your facts and. Whatever your gut's telling you, provided you're on brand, you're all over your business, you're right in it, I've always pulled out when my gut said no. Simple as that.
Well, do I have time to answer this? Yeah.
He's got answers to all the questions.
Because they're not the ones I was given.
No, you see, these
No,
are,
but wait a minute, the 3 pages, we don't
most of them are my speech notes. I write on them. Otherwise, I start using my hand, which doesn't go down very well. This is not an answer that really fits in, but I will answer this. And why I really have to say this, because I've written this with the thought of New Zealand in mind. And this was a story. This is said that years ago, during my long distance swim, the competitiveness was thick. On the boat, on the starting line, there were hundreds of swimmers, stretching, bragging, prancing, and working themselves up. By the time we hit the water, everyone was swimming somebody else's race. The start was an explosion of ego and adrenaline. 20 minutes later, half the field was exhausted with 3 hours to go. If you're going to count on competition to bring out the best in you, you've already surrendered over your most creative asset, your creativity. Real achievement comes from racing ahead when no one else sees the path, and not following the rush when it's not going where you want to go. So if you're dependent on competition to bring out on the best qualities in you, then you've already given up before you even started the race. You have to take control. And with entrepreneurship, it's like before, I'm not sure if you guys have seen that, but there used to be this weighing scale, which is 2 different scales on both ends. They used to do barter trading with that, put something on this side and then weigh it. It's like entrepreneurship is like doing that and weighing 2 different options while having a blindfold on your eye. It's very much a gut feeling for me as well. Thankfully, I haven't had to quit anything yet, but if I do, that will come out of that moment when I just know. Market validation is very important. I do my numbers, I think about it a lot, but when I get into it, then it's just the heart that counts. I don't think through the mind.
Okay, I think we're good with time. Thank you, Rob, Sarah and Vinny. That was quite a special 25 minutes and something that you won't get very often, so you guys did well.